Good morning, Metro. Y'all seem to have really taken up the Baptist kind of way of being. I walked in here, people were clapping and saying amen. I was like, okay. I feel like I'm at home, Tiffany. Maybe I rubbed off a little bit. I don't know. It is good to be back here, Metro. Good to be back amongst you. So, Lenten practices. Understanding that Lent was about giving up something dear and delicious in order to align ourselves with Jesus and his time of wandering in the desert while he wrestled with the enemy. And now that I think about it, that way of thinking about Lent was a lot like entering into Lent as if it was a reboot for New Year's resolutions that we didn't live into. So I've done it. This is me talking. So, and I was even thinking about how I used to do the Daniel fast, right? So the Daniel fast, for those who don't know, is when you would eat during Lent the same foods that Daniel chose to eat instead of all of the delicious food that the king was offering. And of course, at the end, Daniel looked more robust. His skin was all clear, right? Than everyone else who was eating at the king's table. So you did the Daniel fast as a way of entering into Lent because you were giving up something. But if you know how to cook, the Daniel fast could be as delicious. Well, anyway, that's another thing. So I then started thinking years ago that instead of giving up something for Lent, what if I took on something? Out walking, I'm sure people who are driving by are wondering, like, what's going on with her? Because I'm talking and doing all this. And sometimes, for the past couple of weeks, all I could do was go out and sing Great is Thy Faithfulness because I needed to get the stuff out of my head. So it was just me and God, my dog Simba, and Great is Thy Faithfulness. But this idea of filling up is kind of counterintuitive to how we understand Lent. And so if you would go with me on this journey for this Sunday and God willing next Sunday, I want to move away from a scarcity idea of Lent and thinking about how we can be full during this time. So today is full to the brim, prodigal grace, and then next Sunday, if God wills, it'll be full to the brim, brazen beauty. But the prodigal son. Now, I'm guessing this story is pretty familiar to folks. And if not, if the text isn't familiar, I'm guessing the theme is familiar. The long-lost child returns home after time away. Then the family has to readjust because now the family system, which has shifted, is we're fading back into our maybe why, for so long, I thought of the prodigal as a person and not as a way of being. It's not the person. Prodigal means lavish. I thought the person coming back home after a while, that was prodigal. No, it's the lavishness, the extravagance that they lived their life. But let's take a look at this family. So the son boldly doesn't ask his father. He says, "Dad, give me what's coming to me." Now, I never thought about this. I think I've read this parable so many times. I didn't even think about it until a few years ago when my friend Paul Briggs said that to ask a parent for your inheritance, well, how do you get an inheritance? So he was basically telling his dad, was away, long enough for the seasons to change, the money to dry up, and then have to deal with a famine. So let me paint this so he ends up broke. He hires himself out because now he's got nothing. And what does he have to do? He has to feed the pigs. I'm not a farm girl. Closest I ever got to pigs was going to a county fair, and they were all cleaned up, but pigs stink. And he's in that muck and that mire with those pigs, and he's looking at what they're being given to eat, and he's wishing he could have some of that. And I bet he starts thinking about what it was like to recline with his family while the servants brought in all of that good food. And he's starting to see himself then and starting to see himself now. He's probably starting to smell himself too. The son came to him and said, "Give me what's mine." But the way the parable gets told, the father sees him from far off. I imagine that the father was looking for his son the day the last part of his son he saw was his son's back. He must have been looking for him the day he walked out the door. He was looking for him to come back. How many days turned into weeks, turned into months, turned into years? Is that Jesus, Steve? Because if it's, okay. Turns into years while he's waiting and waiting and waiting for his son to come back. And then as he is standing on 9th Avenue, he looks down, way down to 27th Street, and he sees this image coming towards him. And it's getting closer and closer, and he recognizes the walk. He says, "I know that walk. That's my son." We're going to have a party. Get the calf, get the decorations, all the food, set up the tables, put up the tent, call the friends, get the neighbors I don't even like. Tell them to come on because my son is home now. And the eldest son, let's talk about him. He's out in the field working, and he sees a commotion. What is going on? And the servant says, "Oh, your brother. Your brother is back. Isn't that great? Isn't that good news?" If you say so. He's angry, he's hurt, and his feelings are valid. Remember that. His feelings are valid. He doesn't want any of it. And listen to what he says to his dad. "I've worked like a slave, and this son of yours," think, this son of yours, I have nothing to do with him. This son of yours, I couldn't even get my friends together to turn up with a goat. And this son of yours. And the father says, "Yeah, but shares the story of forgiveness, unforgiveness, and grace in his own family. See, his great-grandfather spent years dealing with alcoholism, became repentant after a minister told him, "Pray this prayer." His great-grandfather prayed the prayer, turned his life around, and called his children together, because he had been estranged from his children, called the children together, and the children thought, "Oh, he's just up to his old thing. He's probably going to ask us for money. Like, what's the scheme this time?" And there was no scheme. He wanted forgiveness from his children. So Philip Yancey says that all of the children, except for one, accepted this gift of forgiveness, and that one who didn't accept it was Yancey's grandmother. And he says, I saw that hard knot of forgiveness passed down from my grandmother to my mother to my brother. And I would hear my brother say those very same words to the women that he had divorced. He wouldn't forgive them. They had crossed the line. And I would say, well, do you ever see them now? And his brother would say, no, I'll never speak to them as long earned, unmerited, undeserved, freely, lavishly, extravagantly given, limitless opportunity to be bathed in limitless love was lurking in the corner of the home in the parable, of Philip Yancey's home, and possibly in some of the homes that are gathered right here this morning. See, grace, it can't be bought, it can't be packaged, it can't be shipped, it can't be hoarded. The cup is always full to the brim. It is prodigal. So how do we get it? Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. You ready? All you have to do is open up to the possibility. Open up to the possibility of giving yourself, myself, ourselves, a break from whatever open yourself up to the possibility that if God says you're worthy, you're worthy. Consider for a millisecond that it's not about the commas or the zeros in your bank account. It's not about your gender. It's not about your race. Not even about how beautifully you can sing or lead a Bible study. It's not any of that, right? It has nothing to do with what your family did to you or didn't do to you. It's not about where you live or where you don't live. It is the conduit for God's amazing love poured out to us. And here's the other thing, and this is really going to fry your noodle, if I may. It's available to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. It's also available to the senators who interrogated her. Like, I can't say who can have access. Just filled to the brim and available for anyone who wants to be open to receive it. I'm only here to ask you one thing. Let us not let grace sit lurking in the corner. Amen.